I'm Kathy. It's March 30th, 2026, and I'm sitting in my kitchen, looking at the empty wine glasses on the counter. 2 weeks have passed since the dinner that changed everything. 2 weeks since I chose myself over my father's approval. And as I sit here, I realize that I'm finally starting to heal. It all started on January 2026. My father, Richard Thompson, called me, bursting with excitement. He was being promoted to the managing partner of the energy practice at Thompson & Associates, a high-profile consulting firm. It was the culmination of his 35-year career. "I'm throwing a celebration dinner, Kathy," he said. "All the senior partners will be there. March 15th at Le Cordon Bleu. You're coming, of course." I was genuinely happy for him. Despite the growing rift between us, I still hoped we could have some semblance of a family. But then, on March 8th, he called again with a request that shattered those hopes. "Kathy, this is a professional event. I think it's best if you come alone. Your electrician husband, Tom, won't be comfortable, and I don't want to have to explain his presence to my colleagues." I was stunned. I looked out the window and saw Tom's van pulling into the driveway. I took a deep breath and said, "Dad, you're uninviting my husband because you're embarrassed by his job. If that's the case, then neither do I." He tried to defend his decision, saying it was for Tom's sake, that he wouldn't have anything to contribute to the discussions. But I knew better. I reminded him that Tom had graduated from Stanford with a degree in electrical engineering and had been running his own successful electrical contracting business for years. Tom walked in as I hung up the phone. I told him everything, and he simply said, "Okay." I never expected to go anyway. But it wasn't okay. It was a culmination of years of my father's dismissive behavior. I should have seen it coming. My mother, Linda Thompson, passed away in June 2023 after a long battle with cancer. Before her death, she was the peacemaker in our family, the one who bridged the gap between my father's cold professionalism and his humanity. Without her, the rift between my father and Tom widened. It first became evident at a family dinner in August 2023. Tom mentioned a complex hospital electrical retrofit project he was working on, but my father quickly brushed it off and turned to me, asking about my graphic design work. It was as if Tom hadn't even spoken. Over the next few years, the pattern continued. At Thanksgiving in November 2023, my father spent 40 minutes discussing a high-profile energy consulting project for a large retail chain. When Tom tried to contribute by sharing his insights on energy efficiency in commercial buildings, my father cut him off, saying, "This is a corporate-level challenge, not something you'd understand in residential work." Tom fell silent, and I felt helpless. At Christmas 2023, my father gave my sister, Harriet, a luxurious portfolio, me a gift card to a trendy design store, and Tom a measly $50 gift card to a hardware store. As if a man who earned $90,000 a year running his own business was only worthy of such a paltry gift. And my father never bothered to ask about Tom's education or his projects. In March 2024, at my father's birthday dinner, one of his partners asked Tom where he went to school. When Tom said Stanford, my father interrupted, suggesting that he had only taken some continuing education courses. Tom calmly corrected him, saying he had a full-fledged electrical engineering degree. But my father quickly changed the subject and never mentioned it again. It became clear to me that my father didn't forget about Tom's achievements, he actively dismissed them. He saw Tom simply as an electrician, someone beneath him in the professional hierarchy. In October 2025, during another family dinner, my father was talking about an energy consulting project for a major retail client. The challenge was to retrofit existing systems without a full replacement. Tom quietly mentioned that he worked in commercial, not residential, but my father just kept talking. It was then that I noticed that my father had been discussing energy-related problems in Tom's field for months, yet never once asked for his opinion. Later that night, in the car, I asked Tom if he could solve the retail chain's problem. He said, "I already did. I filed the patent for an energy-efficient HVAC system in 2021. I was shocked and asked if we should tell my father. He replied, "Why? He won't care until he has to." In November 2025, Tom casually mentioned that he had been in licensing negotiations with Thomson and Associates since July. I was stunned. I realized that neither of them knew about the other's involvement. Tom explained that the negotiations were going through an intermediary law firm, and they only knew him as Tom Anderson, a licensed electrician and the sole inventor of the patented technology. I debated whether to tell my father, but in the end, I decided against it. I was exhausted from years of his dismissive behavior. Why should I hand him information he'd never valued enough to seek? On March 15th, while Tom and I were having a quiet dinner at our favorite Italian place, Harriet started sending me texts about the dinner. First, she said my father seemed happy. Then, a text arrived at 9:32 p.m. saying, "Something just happened. Calling you." Instead, a video file appeared in my messages. The video showed my father at the head of the table, smiling. Then, the firm's founding partner, Alfred Thompson, my father's cousin, stood up and asked, "Richard, your daughter Kathy's husband is an electrician, right?" My father nodded. Alfred then asked about Tom's details and finally, "Is he the Tom Anderson who holds the patent for the energy-efficient HVAC system we've been trying to license for our big retail client?" My father's face went pale. He had no idea. Other partners started to realize the situation, and the table fell silent. Alfred pulled my father aside for a private conversation. When they came back, my father looked shaken and left the dinner early. Harriet called me on speaker, and Tom and I explained that we had known about the negotiations. We also told her about the reason Tom had been refusing their terms. Thomson and Associates wanted an unlimited license with no implementation oversight, and they planned to hire the cheapest subcontractors to maximize profit. Tom, on the other hand, insisted on implementation standards and installer certification to ensure safety. After the call, Tom looked sad. I asked him how he felt, and he said, "Your father spent years thinking I was stupid. He never asked about my work, my education. And now his whole career depends on me. It's not justice, it's just sad." Over the next few days, my father started bombarding me with texts and calls, demanding an explanation. He never apologized for his past behavior, he only cared about his career. On March 22nd, I met my father at a coffee shop. I had prepared a timeline of all his dismissive actions over the years. I showed it to him and told him that his behavior was a pattern, not a misunderstanding. He tried to defend himself, saying I was being dramatic, and that Tom should have told him about the patent. I leaned forward and said, "Dad, Tom didn't tell you because you never asked. You judged him based on his job title and never saw the real him. You're not sorry for hurting him, you're only sorry because it affected your career." He offered a half-hearted apology, but I knew it wasn't sincere. I stood up and said, "I'm setting a boundary. If you can't respect my husband, you can't have access to my life." As I drove home, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. I was sad because I had to cut off a part of my family, but I was also relieved because I had finally stood up for myself and Tom. On March 26th, I started therapy. The therapist helped me understand that I wasn't just grieving my father's absence, I was grieving the father he never was. It was a hard realization, but it also gave me a sense of clarity. On March 28th, I met Catherine Johnson, a senior partner at Thomson and Associates, for coffee. She was kind and honest. She told me that what happened at the dinner made her and some other colleagues realize my father's flaw. She also expressed her respect for Tom's insistence on safety standards. She invited me, Tom, and Harriet to a small dinner party at her place in April. Today, March 30th, we had a small gathering at our house. Harriet, Catherine, and Jeremy, Tom's lead electrician, came over. We had a wonderful time, talking, laughing, and sharing stories. It was a far cry from the toxic environment my father had created. As I look around my kitchen, I know that my father might never apologize, and our relationship might be over. But I've set a boundary, and I'm not backing down. I've chosen a life where I'm with people who respect and value me and Tom. Healing has begun, and that's enough.